Jeremy Nell on today's News Talk Radio, TNT.
Jerm Warfare at tntradio.live. That's my email address. Thank you to all those people who do send me emails, and a special thank you, as always, to those who let me know where in the world they are. My name is Jerm. This is Jerm Warfare, the battle of ideas. Tom Compton, thank you for joining me in the trenches.
Well, thank you, Jeremy. It's a pleasure. I really love your work.
Well, thank you so much. This is a very complicated topic, and it's very easy for it to go downhill very quickly. And I think that's why I'm chatting to you, because we want to get some clarity on Christian Zionism. What is it?
Well, you're right. It is a very broad subject, Jeremy. And I guess I've lived through, I've been in a transition, actually. I'm a follower of Christ. I don't like to say I'm a Christian, because as Gandhi once said, I love your Christ, I don't love your Christians. They don't act like Christ. And so we've seen that this notion of Christian Zionism. What is it? I guess the question is, what is it broadly? It's a form of relatively new theology of Christianity, less than 150 years. It's called dispensationalism. And rather than getting into all the nuts and bolts, I would recommend to your audience that they go to our website, whtt.org, and watch our award-winning program video. It's only 28 minutes. It's called Christian Zionism, the Tragedy and the Turning, Part 1. And it'll get into some more of the details that we can't get in here today. But we developed our little group called We Hold These Truths, developed a litmus test. And anybody that's listening can talk to a Christian, whether they're a Christian or not, and ask this very simple question of a Christian: do you believe that the modern state of Israel is a fulfillment of biblical prophecy? And you can tell within probably a nanosecond how they answer that question. If they say yes, 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 and start to levitate off the floor, then you probably won't get too far with them, because this is one of the strong tenets of Christian Zionism, is that this belief in the modern state of Israel is this fulfillment of biblical prophecy. And it has to do with end times eschatology. Eschatology is the study of end times. And it is a spectrum of belief. So, for example, my dear wife, who passed away about 7 years ago, was a dispensationalist. She quit her job and went to a small dispensational Bible college in Dallas, Texas. And, so when I married her, I didn't even know what dispensationalism was. I mean, I wouldn't have known the difference between dispensationalism and Pez dispenser. And for folks that aren't in America, Pez was a little tiny candy dispenser. They were square dispenser, and you open the lid like a cigarette lighter and a candy would come out. But anyway, that's a bad joke. So the spectrum at the extreme end are people like John Hagee from Cornerstone Church. He started a group called Christians United for Israel, which was actually started by Israel. It's a lobbying group for Israel. And he's done things like pray for war in the name of Jesus before the second Gulf War in 2003. And we've documented this in our work at We Hold These Truths. And we've done something quite unique in the fact that we started doing what we call vigils in front of these churches that are Christian Zionist in nature. And again, it's very difficult. The particular church that I go to here in the Phoenix area is an independent church, Bible believing. You will not get dispensational dogma or Christian Zionist dogma from the pulpit there, but it's like an undertow. It's there. We've experienced it in Sunday school classes, and it's very subtle. And it came out here recently with this attack on Gaza. The pastor said, "Oh, we must pray for what's going on in Israel." And yes, we should. We should pray for all the victims, whether they're Jewish or they're Palestinians. As followers of Christ, Christ admonished us in the Beatitudes, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the sons of God." So that's something that we keep in mind. And I had been asking him about his theology, and he did let it kind of slip that he believed that Jerusalem in the end times would a physical Jerusalem. But again, this spectrum is wide, and so people don't. It's hard to put them in extremes like a John Hagee. He just had on the 23rd of October a night to honor Israel. And how extreme it is, here's a Christian gathering, supposedly, and he had a rabbi give the open prayer. And that rabbi said, God is on the side of Israel, the Jews, and the other side is on the other side. In other words, the Palestinians are with the devil, I guess is what he was implicating. So one of the reasons, of course, the pastor doesn't want to get into these kind of debates and so forth. But one of the things I think this is an exciting thing I just learned actually from a man. He's a Jewish man, Aaron Mate, and many of your listeners may be familiar with him. Max Blumenthal of the Gray Zone. They've done amazing work. Well, first I want to preface this by saying the essence of Christianity is explained in one of Jesus's parables. And I've updated this parable today, but it's the parable of the Good Samaritan. And for those not knowing, the Samaritans were hated by the Jews. They were some kind of apostate form of Judaism. I'm not sure. But anyway, the Jews would go out of their way. They lived near Israel and Judah, and Jesus did interface with a Samaritan woman at the well. Anyway, here's what he said. This is in Luke chapter 25 and verses 25. And I want to read this parable here because I think it's important. And behold, a lawyer stood up to put him, meaning Jesus, to the test, saying, "Teacher, what shall I do to inherit eternal life?" He said to him, "What is written in the law? How do you read it?" And he, meaning the lawyer, answered, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself." And he said to him, "You have answered correctly. Do this and you will live." Now, but the lawyer went on. He, desiring to justify himself to Jesus, said, "And who is my neighbor?" Jesus replied, "A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho, and he fell among robbers who stripped him and beat him and departed, leaving him half dead. Now by chance a priest was going down that road. When he saw him, he passed by on the other side. So likewise a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, as he journeyed, came to where he was, and when he saw him, he had compassion. He went to him and bound up his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he set him on his animal and brought him to an inn and took care of him. And the next day he took out 2 denarii, which was about a day's wage, and gave them to the innkeeper, saying, "Take care of him, and whatever more you spend, I will repay you when I come back." which of these three do you think proved to be a neighbor to the man who fell among the robbers? And the Lord replied, the one who showed him mercy. And Jesus said to him, you go and do likewise. So how does this connect with Aaron Mate, who is Jewish? He's a Canadian, but he lives in the U.S. He works, as I said, with the Gray Zone. Well, on Monday, he was taking the Amtrak train to D.C., and as fate or divine providence, I might say, he was sitting across on the train from Senator Chris Coons, an ally of President Biden's. And so he started asking questions. And here's a quote from his. And you need to see his video. He recorded this interview, if you will, or non-interview, because the senator did not want to hear this. In fact, he got him kicked off the train. And quote, here's what Aaron said: because I am of the opinion that the U.S. is supporting a genocidal assault on Gaza, I decided to question Senator Coons about it at that moment. As a result, he was inconvenienced, an awkward exchange and viral video of it. I was inconvenienced with removal from the train and an hour-long wait for the next one. The people of Gaza have no escape from the mass murder campaign that Coons and his colleagues are supporting. And of course, it's a bilateral, or it's a universal acceptance by both the Republicans and Democrats here in the U.S. I like to say we only have one party in the U.S. It's the war party, and the Republican and Democrat side squabble over non-life-threatening issues there. But so my update of this parable, our church they prayed a few weeks ago for what was going on, and then they took up a collection of the Elders Fund. Normally, there's about $20,000 a month that goes into the Elders Fund to help people in need. So they were going to direct that to aid in Israel, and they decided to give it to Samaritan's Purse. And so this is a interesting Christian Zionist connection, because the person that heads this Samaritan's Purse is Franklin Graham, the son of the famed evangelist Billy Graham, who is a dyed-in-the-wool Christian Zionist. Do you have a question there, Jamie? I'm ranting on here, but
no, it's fine. It's fine. What I want to do with you, Tom, just finish that, and then I'm going to jump to a break. Okay, good. Is the fact that here we directed funds. We don't even know if they'll ever get to the Palestinians in Gaza, because Franklin Graham made the comment. They had everything in place on Israel because they've been working with it, and they can't get into Gaza because Israel has blocked everything going in there. So here we have a modern day Samaritan who's Jewish, which is kind of paradoxical, and the Levites and the priests were the ruling class of Judaism at that time, and so you could liken what we did with our church is just throwing some money down at the man that got robbed and so forth, and walking by. But here, Aaron is actually doing something about it, which makes him a Jewish Samaritan. Okay, Tom, I'll be back with you in a moment. My name is Jerm. This is TNT Radio. Tom, so we're talking about Christian Zionism, and it is a bit of an enigma of sorts. I'm trying to figure out why it exists. It's been around, for a century or so, as you pointed out, and I can understand a Jewish Zionism. Christian Zionism seems to be aligned with evangelical Christians, very much with the neocon conservative right wing in the United States. Where do you think it comes from? I mean, it's not just moderate support; it's very, very extreme support.
Yes, you're right, Jeremy. It is. It's a promoted religion, actually. It was promoted through the Scofield Reference Bible that was published by Oxford Press in 1909. Oxford had never published a religious book, or let alone an American. C.I. Scofield was a scoundrel, and there is very good evidence that the early Zionists, particularly Samuel Untermeyer, who was a very wealthy lawyer very influential lawyer in New York, supported Scofield when he wrote the notes. He basically used the King James Version of the Bible, and he wrote notes. And this was then promoted through evangelical seminaries around the country. So this is why it is a phenomena in the evangelical churches. For example, a few years ago at a film showing called Open Bethlehem, I happened to meet the bishop of Phoenix. And I asked him our question, do you believe the modern state of Israel is a fulfillment of biblical prophecy? And he said, well, many Jews believe that, so it's not even in their lexicon of theology, if you will. So it's so deeply ingrained, Jeremy. I'll give you just some recent examples that, of course, Americans have lost their capacity to critically think about any issue. This is well documented in a book written in 1985, Amusing Ourselves to Death, by a man named, his name escapes me right now. But anyway, the last week I was in a Bible study. And before the study started, one of my friends who was baptized at this evangelical church asked me what I thought of what was going on in Gaza. And I said I was just grieved by the loss of lives there. There were over 3,000 children that had been murdered by this retribution by Israel. And he said to me, all these Palestinians need to be killed. How does that fit in with love your neighbor yourself, blessed are the peacemakers? It's so rooted. I was at a second example. I was at a potluck, a vegan potluck this past Sunday, and I knew I was going to be in for trouble because there was an Israeli flag in front of the door. So I had to walk through the Israeli flag to get in. And I happened to be wearing my Pray for Gaza t-shirt that I had worn to church earlier that morning. And they said they wanted to talk about the situation. Well, that didn't happen. And as I think you pointed out in your recent article about Jesus was not a Jew, which is quite remarkable, and I commend you for doing this. It's quite something. But anyway, they do what they do is slander. They said, well, obviously I did not know anything about the history of what's going on there. I spent a month in our Savior's birthplace, Bethlehem, Palestine, back in 2017. With a Christian organization, but we got to hear both sides of the issue there, and traveled throughout Israel. It was quite remarkable. I had a lot of head knowledge when I went there, but I came back with a lot of heart knowledge. I got to worship at two small evangelical churches there. So it's a hard question again. How does it stick so deep? It's a fundamental belief. It's almost like if they don't believe that the modern state of Israel is a fulfillment of biblical prophecy, they're going to lose their salvation. I mean, it's almost like that. Another example, how tightly this is held. My wife, as I said, went to a dispensational college in a Bible college in Dallas, Texas. And she taught Bible studies for 18 years before she passed away in 2016. And 50 of those Bible studies were with a group called Precepts Ministries, headed by a woman named Kay Arthur. And several years before my wife passed away, she told me she was no longer going to teach those lessons from Kay Arthur because she had sympathy for what our little ministry was doing and challenging Christian Zionism. She had compassion, just like Aaron Mate has for the Gaza, here a Jewish man for the Palestinians, what's happening to them in Gaza. And the reason she stopped teaching these courses was because Kay Arthur is a dyed-in-the-wool Christian Zionist. She basically has said that God gave the land to Jews and that the Palestinians don't even have a right to live in Palestine. So that's the extreme end. And so this it's very subtle. As I say in our church, it's an undertow of belief. And just like this encounter on Sunday, you can't rationalize with these people. It's very difficult to come out of this belief system.
Sorry for jumping in, but you're right. It is very, very almost cult-like. It's something that confuses me. It's a bit enigmatic, and I'm wondering if it also is perhaps related to the fact that we have been drummed in with this idea that Israel is God's chosen land. But there does seem to be, in my opinion, a type of ignorance with the modern state of Israel versus the biblical Israel. They're not the same thing, and this is what people, I think, perhaps are misunderstanding. The modern state of Israel is not even, just over 100 years old, or more or less, or about 100 years old, and it was created artificially by the Rothschilds and the United Nations and Balfour and a few others. This is not the biblical Israel.
Well, yeah, I agree, and it's it's really quite, it's amazing. It's so ingrained in people, like I said, that you're right, it doesn't compute, and it is very hard for people to come out of it. I mean, my wife was an exception, and people do come out of Christian Zionism belief if they're willing to engage. Again, as I've said, we've lost our capacity to critically think on any issue, and television and now the dumb phones have reinforced this notion. And so if you, in a conversation, you're going to be lost after 30 seconds with most people. And so the idea, I'd like to, here's a comment that I'd like to make. I don't know who said this, but it's really valuable. We must always be willing to truly consider evidence that contradicts our beliefs and admit that we may be wrong. Intelligence isn't knowing everything. It's the ability to challenge everything you know. And I think that's what we have to look at this, to engage people. Unfortunately, people come out of Christian Zionism only one at a time. It was a process for my wife to understand that probably 99% of what this Precepts Ministries was good, but we all know that rat poisoning contains a very small percentage of poison, so there's a lot of truth in what this. It's not to say that they're totally wrong. One of the things that throws people off is Genesis 12:3-11 to 7, that God gave the land in perpetuity to the Jews. And of course, the Jews today aren't necessarily related to the ancient Israelites. And anyway, in Galatians, Paul, who was a Pharisee that got converted, blinded on the road to Damascus, in his book Galatians in chapter 3, he said that in verse 16 that the seed of Abraham was not many, that seed was one, that was Jesus Christ. So there's neither young or old, Jew nor Greek. We're all in Abraham's seed. And so, again, this makes this whole thing so complicated. I challenged our pastor. He's actually in Galatians, and he just started chapter 3. So I challenged him to make this connection with this widely held belief in Genesis 12 about the land be given in perpetuity. There were conditions, and the ultimate sacrifice was provided by Jesus on the cross. They had a sacrificial system that was insufficient. And there are people, including Christian Zionists, that are ready to rebuild the temple on the Temple Mount in Al-Aqsa, which is Jerusalem, and start sacrificing again. But there's no need for a sacrifice. So, it's very, very difficult for people to comprehend this. Did that make any sense, Jeremy?
Yes, but the thing is, I don't know if this conversation is going to change too many people's minds. And the reason is not because of what you're saying, but I think people will always believe what people will always believe. And that's the point that I was making earlier with this weird dogmatic position that people have regarding Christian Zionism. I mean, well, I say people, but I mean Christians, and in that particular evangelical category. It's very strange to me how they're not even reasonable. I mean, I've had conversations with many of them, and there isn't a sense of understanding the other side. It's just Israel, 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 and it doesn't matter that there are 10, 11,000 Palestinians being killed, and they're not all, that 10, 11, 12,000 that's been killed, they're not all terrorists. These are people too. I mean, a mother with her baby doesn't deserve to be hit by a missile, whether she's Palestinian or Israeli.
Yeah, absolutely, Jeremy. Our little group has done probably 200 vigils in front of these churches. So I've probably been to at least 75. I've done 2 one-man vigils. We hold up signs like "Choose Life, Not War." The evangelicals are uniformly against abortion, but they support these wars. And so, not only the religious side of the equation, but the patriotism. So, for example, there's a pastor in St. Paul, Minnesota. His name is Greg Boyd. In 2004, he had a congregation of about 5,000 people. He did a series entitled "The Cross and the Sword." And in that, the thesis of it, we as citizens of our country, the United States, are under the civil authority of our government, and they wield the sword. As followers of Jesus Christ, we're under his authority. But what so many of the evangelicals have done is weld the cross to the sword. And so they support these wars, particularly in the Middle East, to support Israel, somehow thinking that end times will come sooner. And so you have this notion of patriotism / nationalism. As a result of his, that's a fairly liberal area in Minnesota, and, anti-war and all that kind of stuff. Well, 20%, 1,000 people left the congregation because they could not accept that message. So that even, makes this issue even more complicated. We found, though, we challenged these churches. We were looking for the thinking people. There are people that come out. For example, our founder, Chuck Carlson, did a vigil. I had been there earlier in Washington, D.C. for a thing called Occupy APAC. And he came back he was asked to speak to some Muslims, but he did a vigil with one other man in front of a big mega church in McLean, Virginia, and two men came out. The signs, one of the signs, no more wars for Israel. Another sign, who a Jesus bomb. And it turns out these two men were former military, and the who a Jesus bomb struck with them. In fact, the one man said, well, he had tattoos on himself, and he said, I'm going to get a tattoo who a Jesus bomb. So sometime later, a couple years later, we found him on LinkedIn, connected up, and I've got a story about that and a picture of him with a bomb on his forearm, and Matthew 5:9. Well, that's blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the sons of God. So did we affect somebody? Yes. And, we're not going to do mass conversions because we don't have the power. And so the point is to talk to people about these things. Everybody has a hot question. I've always been a guy that wants to lecture people and to give them the facts. Well, that doesn't work. You got to find people's hot buttons and ask them. So, is it okay to kill innocent children? What about innocent women? So you may have to segue into a conversation with these kinds of notions.
Tom, I'll be back with you in a moment. I just quickly going to jump to a break. My name is Jerm. This is TNT Radio. Tom, we're busy chatting about Christian Zionism, and I think one of the reasons, and I don't have too many arguments for or against this, but I think one of the reasons that so many Christian Zionists are Christian Zionists is probably a result of upbringing, training, propaganda, indoctrination. I remember when I was growing up and I went to Sunday school, I was constantly told about the Jews are the chosen people and Christians are saved by grace. That was something that I was, told my whole life. And I think that there is perhaps this desire not to sway from one's intrinsic inherent belief, and the idea that if you are critical of the Israeli government, you are no longer a Christian, or you are violating some sort of biblical camaraderie, that you shouldn't be violating, But I think what people probably should do, I don't know if you agree with me, is that maybe go back to the history of Israel and just go and study it for yourself. Don't just go by what the media says. Stop listening to CNN. I mean, CNN is openly saying that that Muslims are the enemy. They literally said it.
Yes.
A CNN reporter said a few days ago at a rally, take a stand against Muslims. Those were his words. And I mean, this is profoundly concerning. I mean, I don't think at all that this is where the world should be heading.
Well, you're absolutely right. It is conditioning. We're conditioned to be patriotic. I've always been I love my country. I fear my government, what they're doing. And so, for example, we got involved with our ministry when our founder went into Gaza in 2002, March of 2002. To visit some missionaries there. Yes, there are Christians still in Gaza to this day, believe it or not, maybe only 1,000. And anyway, he was spent a number of days there, talked with many people there, Muslims, talked to some college students, and he actually videotaped a rocket attack where he was staying at a Southern Baptist building. They were pulling out of Gaza, and there was a Apache helicopter hovering above them, shot missiles. It killed 4 Palestinians and wounded 40. And the only way people knew about it is when he came back and to the United States and talked about it. There wasn't much coverage then about that. So we fast forward to the end of near the end of 2002, October. There's a man named Richard Land. He was the president of the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission of the Southern Baptist Convention, the largest evangelical, I think, denomination in the U.S. It had about 20 million followers at the time. And this notion of Christian Zionism is held by some, they estimate 40 to 70 million American evangelical Christians. But anyway, this Richard Land wrote a letter to George Bush. This was in October of 2002, and it was signed by some prominent evangelical Christians like D. James Kennedy of Coral Ridge Ministries, Chuck Colson of Prison Fellowship, and Bill Bright of Campus Crusade. And the letter said that going to war against Iraq and Afghanistan, or Iraq and Saddam Hussein, would be a just war by their interpretation of the Bible. Well, Chuck didn't believe that. We didn't believe that. And just a few weeks later, we started our vigil in front of a Southern Baptist church here in Scottsdale, Arizona, and have been doing these vigils and challenging people. Have we been successful? I don't know. We have 500 and some podcasts. They go around the world. We don't know how people are influenced. Here in the last several months, for some reason, we've had about 250 downloads of our programs from United Arab immigrants. They don't even speak English there, so what they're doing with this, we don't know. We don't know how we influence people, but we need to speak truth, and we need to speak it gently to people and ask more questions.
Look, we've got maybe another 8 minutes or so. So I think I want to ask you perhaps something a little bit more silver lining based. Do you have hope for where things are going? I mean, do you foresee an increase in Christian Zionism, or do you think that it's going to fizzle out?
I think it will fizzle out. I believe, I'm a follower of Christ. I'm not sure about end times. There's such a debate. As I told our senior pastor, I don't care what your end times theology is, as long as you don't ignore the suffering of others. And that's what's happened. I mean, with my fellow Christian telling me we need to kill all the Palestinians. I mean, that's craziness. And it's you can't even comprehend anybody saying that. But I see hope. Yes, God is in control. We don't understand. I like the notion of our senior pastor said that when man with a finite mind tries to understand the infinite mind of God, there's a lot of spillage. Now, a lot of Christians don't think there's any spillage because they think they're as smart as God, and so they don't budge from their theology. Now, Joe Sixpack in the pew, he's going to do what's comfortable. He doesn't want to challenge, so holding on to his beliefs like you were indoctrinated. I wasn't in that era. I looked at Israel as a Marxist showplace in the Middle East. I had no concept about what was happening to the Palestinians until about 20 some years ago, when we started getting into this issue. So I was woefully didn't know what was going on. I didn't know about the Nakba, where 750,000 Palestinians were forced out of their homes. 500 of the villages were destroyed in 1948. So, I've learned some of that history there. And I think there's hope. God's in control. We don't understand it. I'm just a mortal man. I make mistakes. I've been deceived on many issues throughout my life. And, God gives us grace. And hopefully, people like my friend, if I work on him again, maybe he'll see what the error is. But again, we're railing against these Christian mega leaders that people are following. We all look to leaders to follow them. We want somebody to believe in. So if a John Hagee, who has like a 20,000 person mega church in Cornerstone in San Antonio, Texas, he's very charismatic. We actually have been to his church and held a vigil in front of it. There were like 9 people. This has been well over 10 years ago. So, I think it is. And the sad thing is what Israel is doing is committing national suicide. You saw that with the COVID narrative. One of my heroes is Dr. Vladimir Zelenko, who was a Orthodox Jewish MD that developed early protocols for treating COVID-19 patients. He treated over 6,000 people with these early protocols. Even President Trump in 2020, or I think in April, March or something, took his protocols. He was lost his job at the clinic or hospital where he was in Monroe, New York. He went to Israel, met with their minister of health. He even talked to Bibi Netanyahu, did went to a rabbinical court in Jerusalem and warned them against doing mass vaccinations. Israel is one of the most vaccinated countries in the world. So, people like him, he unfortunately passed away a little over a year ago from cancer at the age of 48. He was a Zionist. He cared about Israel. And so that throws in.
I just want to add to that. Sorry for jumping in. We are starting to run out of time, Tom, but just on that, what I have found very strange is, as you correctly pointed out, Israel is one of the most vaccinated countries in the world. I didn't see all these same Christian Zionists and other Zionists going in the same way that they've been going over the last month or two. The Israeli government was mandating, right, a toxic injection into millions of its own citizens. Where were the protests? Why was nobody going after the Israeli government? Suddenly, the Israeli government is bombing its neighbor, and now suddenly it's fine, and we can support the Israeli government. But where was the criticism when it was injecting millions of its own citizens?
Well, that's true, but you look at our evangelical church was closed for a while during COVID. Why should we have done that? I went to the first Arabic Baptist church during 2020. A friend of mine, Pastor Jamal Bashara, was from Nazareth. He was an Israeli citizen. He was a real man of God. He passed away from cancer at the age of 62. And, he held in his small church, and he held his services. You could wear a mask. You didn't have to wear a mask. He didn't care. We were there, and, that should have been. So, these evangelical Christians, to one extent or another, accepted the narrative that was provided by the government. So that kind of explains that they've been, and even Palestinians, a man that I greatly admire, said when he was on a trip here, he was a geneticist, taught at Yale and at Duke, and he moved back to Bethlehem, where he's from. He started an Institute of Biodiversity and Sustainability at the University of Bethlehem, and he said in a tour here, when somebody asked him a question, asked him about the vaccinations. Well, he said the Ministry of Health there gave them the outdated vaccines, and they complained and to get the right ones. So, I mean, there's deceptions on all sides. So I think that's true of Christians here in the U.S.
Well, I mean, thankfully, I live in a country with one of the lowest vaccination rates in the world, and I have lots of theories about that, but that's for another day. Okay, we are now into the final lap here. So, okay, tell me, how can I find out more about your organization?
Well, go to whtt.org. WeHoldTheseTruths.org. And we have a wealth of information. As I said earlier on, go look at our award-winning documentary. We won an international award at the Amar Popular Film Festival in Tehran, Iran in 2014. Those crazy Iranians don't want American bombs. And what we're seeing now is, I mean, this could be disastrous if this goes beyond. Hezbollah is responding to Israel. This could go out of control here. And so we need some sanity. We don't seem to have any sanity in our Congress. They passed a resolution. Only 10 Congress critters voted no to giving our unconditional support for Israel. The new Speaker of the House, one of his things is to give Israel $14 billion more dollars above the 3.8 and whatever we all give. And, so we just have to push back. And, thank God for more Jewish people that are pushing back. I mean, there's several hundred that got arrested in Central Station in New York that were protesting what was going on. So that's where we need to join together. We may have differences of opinion on the issue of abortion or whatever, but on the issue of war and killing, we should be united. And protecting innocent life, I think, is so utterly important.
Yeah. Tom Compton, thank you so much for joining me in the trenches.
Thank you, Jeremy, excuse me.
I just want to point out, as a disclaimer to this conversation, and I'm sure you'll agree with me, Tom, that when we speak about Christian Zionism and our critiques thereof, this is not about disliking or hating anybody. This is not about disliking or hating Israelis. This is a critique of an ideological position. This is a critique often of the Israeli government. This is not about the Israeli citizens themselves. There are all sorts of Israeli citizens, from obviously majority Jews, but also Christians and Muslims and other types of people who are Israelis. Yes. And a lot of them do not like what's going on. So when I critique Israel, I'm critiquing the Israeli government, not at all the people themselves. I just want to point that out because there's always this knee-jerk reaction to a critique of Israel, and Christian Zionists are very guilty of this too, I have found. So I needed just to make that clear. But anyway, Tom, thank you so much for. Yes,
that's very great, and I would recommend. The Israelis are conditioned too. You can get this online. It's called Defamation. It's done by an Israeli Jew. It's quite an amazing documentary.
All right, Tom, we are out of time, but I do appreciate your time. Thank you for joining me. Thank you, Alex, for keeping things going. Jump into the live chat as always, but please do send me a mail. Let me know what you thought. Jerm Warfare at tntradio.live. Give me feedback. Give me ideas for talking points. Give me criticism if you want. Disagree. Engage in the battle of ideas. That's what I do. I engage in the battle of ideas, and they are often quote unquote controversial. But I think we've reached this weird point in human history where we become this generation of cupcakes. We are offended by everything. We can't speak about anything. We must keep quiet. How dare you? You know, how dare you talk about that? And I think Socrates and Plato and the ancient Greeks would be turning in their graves if they saw how unbelievably fragile we become. Please engage in these conversations, and I will catch you tomorrow. My name is Jerm. This is Jerm Warfare, the Battle of Ideas.